Well folks, it's quite a time to be a Matt Groening fan, as Disenchantment Part 4 just released on Netflix, and if you haven't heard yet, Futurama was just announced to be revived for 20 episodes at Hulu. Wild times, folks, wild times. But as usual, the new season of Disenchantment has some really fun little Futurama references sprinkled throughout. Now, as you know, I do one of these videos every year, but rather than just cover the new season, I'm going to recap every Futurama reference from parts 1 through 3, as well as the new ones from part 4, even though I covered them in my previous videos. It's just nice to have them all in one place, you know? Plus, I'll address some of the comments I got in the last video pointing out other references and give you my take on those. So let's get to it. The first reference we see to Futurama is very early on. In Chapter 2, For Whom the Pig Oinks, we see Merkimer at the Royal Wigsmith, and here on the shelf is unmistakably Philip J. Fry's hair. A fun and small reference, you love to see it. The second confirmed reference comes in Chapter 10, when Lucy rewinds and replays events with this magical orb. If you freeze frame, you can catch an image of Fry, Bender, and Farnsworth in the forward traveling time machine from Futurama's 6th season episode, The Late Philip J. Fry. An incredible Emmy Award-winning episode that I've talked about endlessly in like 3 different videos. It's also pretty fun to use this to speculate whether or not Futurama and Disenchantment actually share a universe, which, sorry to be that guy, but no, I don't think they do. These are just references, but it's still fun to speculate, and you can't let anyone take that away from you, not even AV Club. Now jumping to part 2 of Disenchantment, they really dial up the Futurama references here. In Chapter 12, Stairway to Hell, we see this series of tubes used to transport Elfo from heaven to hell, which look remarkably like the tubes seen to launch people across New York in Futurama. Also in Chapter 12, King Zog, voiced by John DiMaggio, unleashes his fury with this nod to DiMaggio's famous Futurama role, Bender Bending Rodriguez.
Bite my shiny metal axe!
Pretty on the nose, but fun for sure. Actually, funny enough, in the Futurama episode The Inhuman Torch, Bender also says, "Bite my shiny metal axe."
Bite my shiny metal axe!
Also, Hulu, please pay John DiMaggio and get him on board the Futurama revival. You're really shooting yourself in the foot if you don't. In Stairway to Hell, we also have a couple things that people seem to think are references to Futurama, but I mostly think are just coincidences, but it's still fun to point these things out. We see Jerry trying to smash bugs with a hammer, and he's told to aim where they're going to be, not where they are. This is the same verbiage used in Anthology of Interest 2's segment Raiders of the Lost Arcade, where Fry wants to know what life would be like if it were like a video game. I see why people say this is a reference. I kind of think it's just how you have to play Space Invaders and how you would have to smash bugs with a hammer, but who knows, Stairway to Hell is written by Futurama showrunner David X. Cohen, so maybe it was a little nod to his old show. Another thing that falls into the coincidence but maybe reference pile is the fact that Lucy flies Bean and Elfo out of hell, much like Bender flies Fry and Leela out of robot hell in the first season Futurama episode Hell is Other Robots. Fun stuff. The next one comes in Chapter 14, The Lonely Heart is a Hunter. We see Bean and Zog in the basement storage area of Dreamland's castle, and here in the background we see what looks an awful lot like a holophoner from Futurama's episodes Parasites Lost, and of course its original series finale, The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings. Both incredible episodes. In fact, they are very high on my every episode ranked list, plug. This feels like it was probably a fun little reference thrown in by one of the animators. In Chapter 18, we hear Zog throw out another line that Futurama's Bender is famous for.
Well, let's go already!
It definitely works for both characters.
Let's go already!
The next couple of references come in my favorite episode of Disenchantment Part 2, Chapter 19, The Electric Princess. First is a hilarious deep cut. We see Bean open up a drawer on Sky Gunderson's airship to reveal assorted lengths of wire. Back in the very first episode of Futurama, Space Pilot 3000, Professor Farnsworth brags about the drawer where he keeps his assorted lengths of wire, and if you look closely, they're all organized the exact same way. This episode also features a little model of the Planet Express ship in Gunderson's shed, as seen here. This might be more of a fun little coincidence than it is a reference, but it's definitely worth pointing out that Bean's introduction to Steamland through this big window does feel a bit like Fry's introduction to New York back in Space Pilot 3000. There's also the fact that Gunderson is a brand name used in Futurama for Gunderson's nuts. I'm not 100% sure if this is a reference. The Simpsons also has a character named Gil Gunderson, so it could just be a funny name that the writers of these shows like to use over and over again. And the Gunderson airship's business in Steamland is actually located on Farnsworth Boulevard, a reference to Futurama's Professor Hubert J. Farnsworth, whose name is in turn a reference to the inventor, Philo Farnsworth, a pioneer of television engineering. And the last reference in Part 2 that I noticed is this funny courtroom gag.
Chairs with 5 Z's.
I think I've done enough court reporting to know how to spell Chaz.
This parallels Futurama's famous Star Trek episode where no fan has gone before, when George Takei is giving his autograph to Melvar.
Melvar has 3 L's.
I think I've done enough conventions to know how to spell Melvar.
Now on to part 3, baby. The first episode, Subterranean Homesick Blues, gives us a couple more nods. We pretty quickly get a really fun little Easter egg in the Trog Society's room of hoarded treasure. You can see what looks to be the Doomsday device that Professor Farnsworth built and used in the Futurama episode Time Keeps on Slippin'.
Doomsday device? Ah, now the ball's in Farnsworth's court.
One of Futurama's best episodes, to be honest. Anytime we have a background with a bunch of stuff piled up like this, you should comb through it. There's probably some kind of reference. Later in the episode, King Zog once again delivers one of Bender's famous catchphrases.
Let's go already!
Hard not to connect these dots with DiMaggio playing both characters. Next, there are a few more found in Steamland. I got a few comments about this one last time around. When the Archdruidess knocks over this guy in Steamland, she slaps him 3 times across the face.
Those were my legs, lady. You could have used a hand signal.
Hand signal, eh?
Oh, oh, oh!
She's also voiced by Tress MacNeille, who played Mom in Futurama, a character known for her triple slaps.
Jam a bastard in it, you crap!
Ow!
In the League of Gallivanting Scrutinators, we see a picture on the wall of an explorer and a narwhal. Okay, maybe this is just a cool adventure-y thing to do, but it looks like Lilu from the Futurama movie Bender's Big Score, which was an integral part of Lars Fillmore's story. Also seen in the League's headquarters is the head and neck of a giraffe sporting a crown, which could be a nod to the royal giraffe we see in the episode The Late Philip J. Fry, who has enslaved mankind in the year 1.5 million. I also noticed the logo for what seems to be a delivery company called Airship Express, and yeah, that logo is very familiar, almost as though it's literally Planet Express, but in Steamland. Okay, here's another one that I got a ton of comments about that I think is probably worth explaining. In the episodes Steamland Confidential and Freak Out, we see this carnival on the pier, and there's a ride called Trip to the Moon with a giant moon-faced character on it. You can see the roller coaster goes through his eye. Lots of folks are saying that this is a reference to Craterface, as seen in the second episode of Futurama the series has landed. He's the mascot at Lunar Park.
I'll have to confiscate your alcohol, sir.
Better mascots than you have tried.
Even pointing out that Bender sticks a beer bottle in his eye, just like how the roller coaster goes through this one's eye. But here's the thing, folks. These are actually both references to a classic piece of film history, a French short film called A Trip to the Moon. The iconic image from this film is the moon sporting this face and this rocket getting stuck in his eye. So while they are definitely both references, it's not a Futurama reference strictly. And the final Futurama reference I noticed in part 3 is probably the best one. In the spooky ventriloquist dummy shop, you can see a dummy that looks suspiciously like Bender. Honestly, I want this dummy, almost as much as I want a Tickle Me Bender. There's also a gargoyle that many have pointed out looks like Pazuzu, but it might just be a gargoyle.
Pazuzu, you ungrateful gargoyle!
Now let's move on to the new stuff, part 4. I noticed a few references this season, some blatant and some less so. I love this first one. In episode 4, Goon Baby Goon, Cercerio takes these hands back from Elfo and says,
"Well, as far as I'm concerned, they're the devil's hands, not idle playthings."
This is very specifically a reference to Futurama's very first series finale, The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings, in which Fry switches hands with the robot devil. That title is in turn a reference to the phrase, idle hands are the devil's playthings. And in this same exact scene, we can actually see the recently deceased Pendergast's head in a jar, remarkably similar looking to the classic heads in jars in Futurama. A few episodes later, we got one of the most fun references we've ever gotten. As Bean swims down to the broken off part of Dreamland Castle, she passes this ship, and inside there is very clearly a Zoidberg-esque crustacean creature. He has a couple extra fins, but this is unmistakably a decapodian face. And the final Futurama reference I noticed in Disenchantment Part 4 comes in the penultimate episode, The Goodbye Girl. Lucy discovers a massive comic library under the castle, and in this shot, which is filled with tons of fun Easter eggs and references, we can very clearly see the actual Futurama comic number 1 from Bongo Comics, initially released back in the year 2000. Now, if you want to go even deeper with this reference, the copy seen here is actually the orange variant that was only available at San Diego Comic-Con. The regular version is red. That's a deep cut. And those are all of the Futurama references I noticed in the first 40 episodes of Disenchantment. There are some other things people claim are references, but I think the similar animation styles just create parallels where otherwise there really aren't any. I don't think this kid is meant to be a reference to Fry. This guy in the pile of corpses isn't Scruffy. You can see that his hair here looks different if you look closely. And this airship from the very first episode of the show was never meant to be the Planet Express ship. It was actually just foreshadowing the existence of Steamland. But if there are other references that you think I did miss, let me know below in the comments. Maybe I can put them in a video for part 5 when that drops. And of course, if you like this video, do not forget to comment, like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and stay tuned for more. Peace.
Johnny! Two cellos!